The fluorescent lights of Mercy General Hospital's emergency room hummed with their usual cold indifference, casting harsh white light over a scene that had repeated itself 1,000 times before. It was 11:40 p.m. on a Friday in November, and the ER existed in that strange liminal space between the chaos of the day shift and the eerie quiet of the deep night. Doctors moved with practiced efficiency. Nurses checked monitors. Patients waited. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. The ambulance bay doors exploded inward with a violence that made everyone freeze. Not the gentle whoosh of automatic doors, but the crash of metal against rubber. Stops, the screech of wheels locked too late, the sharp bark of urgent voices cutting through the medical calm like gunfire through silence. GSW to the abdomen. Multiple penetrating trauma. BP, dropping fast. The stretcher came through those doors like a missile surrounded by a corona of paramedics whose faces held that particular expression emergency workers get when they know they're losing. On that stretcher lay a young man in desert camouflage, his uniform dark with blood that kept spreading, despite the pressure dressing someone had applied in the field. Private Tyler Nash was 21 years old. He'd been home from Syria for exactly 6 days. Tonight, he'd gone to a bar to try to feel normal again. Tonight, someone had decided he'd seen too much. The lead paramedic was already shouting as they crashed through the doors. 21-year-old male active military, multiple GSWs to the torso, lost consciousness at the scene. We've got 2 large bore IVs running wide open, but we can't keep up with the bleeding. He coded once in the bus. We got him back, but he's circling the drain. The ER attending physician on duty was Dr. Olivia Pierce, and at 29 years old, with only 8 months in her attending position, she'd never seen anything like this. Her residency had been at a quiet suburban hospital. Mass shootings happened on the news, not in her ER, not on her watch. She moved toward the trauma bay, but her movements had none of the certainty they needed. Her voice cracked when she called out orders. Get him to Bay 3. I need somebody page trauma surgery. Where's the central line kit? We need to type and cross for 10 units. No, wait, make it 20. Is respiratory here yet? The residents and nurses around her scrambled to obey, but there was no choreography to their movements, no practice flow. There was only panic, wearing the mask of professionalism, and that mask was slipping fast. They transferred Private Nash to the trauma bed. His blood pressure was 60/40 and falling. His oxygen saturation was 82%. His heart rate was 140. His body trying desperately to compensate for the massive blood loss. Someone cut away his uniform, revealing 3 entrance wounds in his abdomen and 1 in his upper chest. But it was the chest wound that was the real killer, though Dr. Pierce didn't know that yet. Start CPR, someone shouted, though the kid still had a pulse weak and thready as it was. A first-year resident started compressions, but his rhythm was wrong, his depth inconsistent, his panic making him bounce on the patient's chest rather than compress it with steady life-saving pressure. Dr. Pierce's hands shook as she tried to insert a central line. She missed the vein once, twice. Blood welled up, adding to the crimson that already covered everything. A nurse fumbled with a blood bag and dropped it. The bag burst on the floor with a wet slap that sounded obscenely loud in the controlled chaos. I can't. Where's the attending surgeon? Somebody page him again. But the surgeon was in another hospital consulting on a case 40 minutes away, even if he broke every traffic law getting back. Private Tyler Nash had maybe 5 minutes. In the corner of the trauma bay, ignored by everyone invisible in the way that housekeeping and support staff always are in hospitals, stood a woman in faded blue scrubs. Her name tag read R. Callahan Supply Services in small bureaucratic letters that told you nothing about who she really was. Rhea Callahan was 58 years old. She had short gray hair cut in a military style that she'd never quite abandoned, though she'd left the service 19 years ago. Reading glasses hung on a chain around her neck, and she hated them with a passion, but her eyes weren't what they used to be. A scar ran down her left forearm, visible when her sleeve rode up, the kind of scar that shrapnel makes when it tears through flesh and barely misses the artery beneath. She'd been restocking the supply cart when they brought Private Nash in. Now she stood perfectly still, her hands resting on the cart's metal frame, her eyes tracking every movement in that trauma bay with an intensity that didn't belong on the face of a supply clerk. She saw the resident doing CPR wrong. She saw Dr. Pierce's hands shaking as she failed again to place the central line. She saw the tension pneumothorax that no one else had identified yet, the air building up in the space around Private Nash's lung, collapsing it, pressing on his heart, killing him by inches, while everyone focused on the obvious bleeding and missed the invisible death creeping up. She saw the wound pattern. 3 shots to the abdomen grouped loosely, but all center mass. 1 shot to the upper chest right side angled upward. The shooter had been firing from a lower position, probably kneeling or prone. The grouping suggested military training, not the wild spray of a panicked civilian. The chest shot was the kill shot, deliberate and placed exactly where it would do maximum damage, while looking like it might have missed the heart. This wasn't a bar fight. This was an execution that someone had tried to make look random. Ria's hands tightened on the cart. She'd seen this before. Different desert, different year, different faces, but the same essential truth: a soldier dying while people who should know better fumbled in the dark. The monitors began their horrible song. The steady beat became a whine, became a flatline scream. Private Tyler Nash's heart stopped. "He's in arrest. Start compressions. Push EP." The resident was still doing it wrong. Bouncing, panicking, wasting precious seconds. Dr. Pierce froze. Just for a moment, but in trauma medicine, moments are measured in lost brain cells and dying tissue. Her eyes went wide, her mouth open. No words came out, and Ria Callahan made a choice. She stepped away from the supply cart. Her reading glasses fell from her neck, caught by the chain. Her limp, the one she always had by the end of a 12-hour shift because shrapnel had done things to her hip that surgery could only partially fix, disappeared entirely as muscle memory, 20 years old, took over. She walked toward the trauma bay, not running, not rushing, walking with the terrible, certain inevitability of someone who'd done this before in places where the price of failure was watching your brothers die in the sand. "Step aside, doctor." Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It had the quality of command, the tone that drill instructors use, and combat leaders earn the voice that says, "I am not asking," without any need for volume. Dr. Pierce turned, confused. Who are you?" "Step aside." This time there was volume. This time there was the full weight of 2 decades in combat zones, of firefights and mass casualties, of moments when seconds meant the difference between a flag-draped coffin and a soldier going home to his family. The entire trauma bay fell silent except for the flatline alarm. Dr. Pierce stepped aside. She didn't decide to. Her body just obeyed that voice the way bodies do when they recognize authority that comes from somewhere deeper than a hospital hierarchy. Ria moved to the bedside. She looked at Private Nash's chest for exactly 3 seconds. Her hands, steady as steel, reached for his neck, checking for a pulse that wasn't there. Her eyes scanned the monitors, processing information that everyone else had been staring at without really seeing. "Stop compressions," she said quietly. The resident stopped, confused. "But he's in home. You're doing them wrong. You're bouncing him, not compressing. You're moving blood backward, not forward. Watch." She placed her hands on Private Nash's chest. Proper position, proper depth, proper rhythm. 100 compressions per minute exactly. Deep enough to compress the chest by at least 2 inches. No bouncing, no hesitation. Just the steady, mechanical precision of someone who'd done this in the back of Humvees while under fire in field hospitals with mortars landing outside in places where you didn't get to panic because panic meant your Marines died. After 15 compressions, she stopped. "Resume," she said to the resident, who copied her technique with suddenly better results. Then Ria turned to Dr. Pierce. "He has a tension pneumothorax on the right side. The chest wound penetrated the lung. Air is escaping into the pleural space with every breath the bag gives him. It's compressing his heart. The bleeding is secondary. The chest is primary." Dr. Pierce stared at her. "How do you know?" "Look at his neck veins. Distended. Look at his trachea. Deviating to the left. Listen to his chest. Sounds absent on the right. This is textbook. You're just too panicked to see it." There was no cruelty in her voice. No judgment. Just statement of fact delivered by someone who'd stopped having time for ego about the same time she'd stopped having time for fear. "I need a 14-gauge angiocath. Second intercostal space midclavicular line right side. He needs a needle decompression, and he needs it 30 seconds ago." A nurse moving on autopilot handed Ria the needle. Dr. Pierce found her voice. "Wait, you can't. You're not credentialed to..." Ria's eyes met hers. Gray eyes, steady, utterly calm. "Doctor, you can report me after we save this kid's life. Right now you have a choice. You can worry about hospital policy, or you can watch me do what needs to be done. Choose fast." Dr. Pierce swallowed, stepped back. Ria's hands moved with the kind of certainty that comes from having done a procedure so many times that it becomes muscle memory deeper than thought. She palpated Private Nash's chest, found the landmark, prepped the site with alcohol in one quick swipe. The needle went in, clean angled, correctly advanced until the hiss of escaping air was the most beautiful sound in that trauma bay. Immediate change. The pressure crushing Private Nash's heart released. His blood pressure, which had been 40 over nothing, began to climb. 50 over 30, 60 over 35. His oxygen saturation ticked upward. 84%, 86, 88. His heart, which had been in arrest, began to beat again on its own. The monitor's flatline scream became a beep, irregular at first, then finding rhythm. Private Tyler Nash gasped, a real breath. The first one he'd taken in minutes that actually moved air into his lungs instead of into the space around them. The trauma bay erupted in controlled chaos again, but this time it was productive chaos. This time they knew what they were doing because someone had shown them what needed to be done. Rhea stripped off the gloves she'd pulled from the box by the bedside. She dropped them in the biohazard bin. She turned away from Private Nash, who was now being properly managed by a team that had found their rhythm, and walked back to her supply cart. She picked up the clipboard she'd dropped, found her place in the inventory list, continued checking off boxes as if nothing had happened. Her hands, which had been steady as bedrock while working on the patient, shook now. Just slightly, just enough to make her handwriting messy. But no one was looking at her as everyone was staring at her. Dr. Pierce stood frozen still, processing what had just happened. The resident who'd been doing compressions wrong stared with his mouth open. The nurses exchanged glances that said they'd just witnessed something they didn't understand but recognized as significant. A young nurse, 26 years old, with only 2 years of experience, approached cautiously. Her name tag read E. Reeves. Elena Reeves had worked enough shifts with the quiet supply clerk to know that something about tonight was different, though she couldn't articulate what. "Mrs. Callahan," Elena whispered, "that was incredible. Where did you learn to—" Rhea didn't look up from her clipboard. "Just instinct, Elena. Nothing special. You see enough emergencies, you pick things up. But the way you saved his life. You did procedures that—" "The doctor saved his life," Rhea said firmly. "I just helped with a small technical aspect. Dr. Pierce, you did excellent work. The kid's breathing. That's what matters." It was a lie, and everyone in that room knew it was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that people accept because the alternative is too complicated, too messy, too far outside the normal order of things. Dr. Pierce managed to find her voice. "Thank you. I froze. I almost killed him." "But you didn't," Rhea said, still not looking up. "He's alive. That's all that counts. You'll do better next time. This is how we learn." She pushed her cart toward the supply room, limping again now that the adrenaline was fading, and her hip remembered that it had been damaged in a mortar attack in Fallujah 20 years ago. Behind her, the trauma bay continued its work. Private Nash was stable enough now for transport to surgery. The bleeding was under control. His vitals were improving. He would live to see tomorrow, and maybe the day after that, and maybe eventually go home to whatever home looked like for a soldier who'd been shot 3 times by someone who'd made it look like a random act of violence. Elena Reeves watched Rhea disappear into the supply room, then turned to Margaret Flynn, a 58-year-old nurse who'd been working at Mercy General for 30 years and had seen everything the night shift could throw at a hospital. "Margaret," Elena whispered. "Who is she?" Margaret's face was unreadable. "That's Rhea Callahan. Works part-time night shift supply services. Been here about 18 months. "Yeah, but before that—" "Where did she come from?" Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said very carefully, "I don't know for certain, but I've been a nurse long enough to recognize combat medicine when I see it. That woman didn't learn those skills in a civilian hospital. She learned them somewhere people die if you make mistakes. She learned them somewhere people die even when you do everything right. And she learned them a long time ago because that kind of calm doesn't come from books or simulation, it comes from experience. Should we ask her?" "No," Margaret said. "Women like that, they go quiet for a reason. You respect the quiet." In the supply room, Rhea leaned against the metal shelving, her hands finally stopping their shaking. She closed her eyes. For just a moment, she wasn't in a hospital in Denver. She was in Fallujah, November 2004, crouched behind a burned-out Humvee while machine gun fire tore the air apart above her head. She was 20 years younger, and the Marines bleeding into the sand around her were counting on her to keep them alive long enough for an evacuation that command kept promising was coming. She opened her eyes. The memory faded. This was now. That was then. She'd survived. Most of her Marines had survived. She'd come home and tried to build a life that didn't involve watching people die. Rhea returned to her cart, found her inventory list, and got back to work. She had supplies to stock. That was her job now. Just a supply clerk. Nothing special, nothing worth noticing. Invisible. The rest of the shift passed in the usual controlled chaos of a Friday night ER. A drunk driver with minor injuries and major attitude. An elderly woman with chest pain. A teenager who'd fallen skateboarding and needed stitches. Routine, normal. The kind of cases that emergency rooms handle every night in every city in America. At 7 a.m., Rhea clocked out. She changed from her scrubs into jeans and a flannel shirt, both well-worn and comfortable. She walked to her truck in the parking garage, a 15-year-old Ford F-150. That ran perfectly because she maintained it with the same attention to detail she brought to everything else. The drive home took 20 minutes. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of Denver. The kind of neighborhood where people kept to themselves and houses had front porches that no one used. She parked in the driveway, let herself in through the front door, set her keys on the hook by the entrance with the automatic precision of long habit. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It had been too quiet for 5 years now. Ever since the morning she'd found David in the garage with the engine running and a note on the dashboard that said simply, "I'm sorry, I can't anymore." David Callahan, Army Ranger. 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. Come home with PTSD so severe that the VA had put him on a waiting list for treatment that never came. The waiting list had lasted 8 months. He'd lasted 7. Rhea didn't think about that morning if she could help it. She'd gotten good at not thinking about things. She made coffee. Strong black the way she'd learned to drink it in the Navy when sugar and cream were luxuries field units didn't have. She sat at the kitchen table and looked at the photos on the wall. Her wedding photo. She'd been 24, David 26, both of them young and certain that love could conquer anything. It had conquered a lot, just not everything. Her daughter's commissioning photo. Lieutenant Mara Callahan, naval aviator, 30 years old and currently deployed somewhere in the Persian Gulf, flying F/A 18 Rhinos off a carrier deck. Rhea was proud of her daughter and terrified for her in equal measure, the way all military parents are, the way she'd been since Mara had announced her intention to join the Navy at 18. And one photo that most people wouldn't notice, tucked in the corner. A group of Marines in desert fatigues, dirty and exhausted, grinning at the camera with the particular kind of smile that comes from having survived something that should have killed you. 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, November 2004. Fallujah. Rhea was in that photo, the only woman smaller than the rest, but standing with the same straight-backed pride. Most of the men in that photo had made it home. 3 hadn't. She wondered sometimes what had happened to the others. If they'd stayed in, if they'd gotten out, if they'd managed to build lives that made sense after combat, or if they were all, like David, silently drowning and too proud to ask for help until it was too late. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. She almost didn't open it. Unknown numbers were usually spam, but something made her click. The message was 4 words, "Wolf is in town." Rhea's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully on the table. Davian Wolf, Staff Sergeant USMC, retired, one of her Marines from Fallujah. She hadn't heard from him in 6 years, not since David's funeral, when Wolf had flown in from Seattle to pay his respects. She texted back where the response came immediately. "Need to talk. Important. Can't do it over phone. 3 p.m. Veterans Memorial Park, southwest corner." Rhea looked at the clock. It was 7:30 a.m. She had time to sleep, but she knew she wouldn't. When old Marines texted you saying they needed to talk and couldn't do it over the phone, you didn't sleep. You started making the kind of preparations that people who've never been to war don't understand. She went to her bedroom closet, reached past the civilian clothes to the lockbox in the back, opened it with a key she kept on a chain she never took off. Inside was her old military ID, her discharge papers, and a small digital recorder that she'd carried with her through Iraq and Afghanistan and had used exactly once on November 10th, 2004 to record radio traffic that she'd known even then would someday matter. She hadn't listened to that recording in 20 years. Didn't need to. She remembered every word. Rhea closed the box, locked it, put it back. She tried to sleep. Failed. At 2:30 p.m., she got in her truck and drove to Veterans Memorial Park. The park was quiet on a Saturday afternoon in November. A few joggers, a family with kids at the playground, an old man feeding pigeons. Normal. Peaceful. Rhea parked and walked to the southwest corner near the memorial wall where names of the dead were carved in granite. She found Davian Wolf standing in front of a specific section of the wall, the section for Iraq 2004. He looked old. He was only 57, a year younger than her, but he looked 70. Gray-haired, thin, moving carefully like everything hurt. When he turned to face her, she saw that his eyes had the look that combat veterans get when they've spent too many years trying to outrun their memories, and the memories are finally catching up. "Doc," he said quietly. In the Marines, corpsmen were always called Doc, even the women, especially the women who earned it under fire. "Davian," she replied. "What's wrong?" He looked around, checking for listeners, old habits. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "They're cleaning house, Doc. The witnesses. Everyone who was there that day in Fallujah when Colonel Harrow left us to die. Jackson Tate, remember him dead. Car accident, they said, but I saw the scene photos. Someone ran him off the road deliberately. Miguel Ramirez dead house fire accelerant, traces the local cops couldn't explain. Sarah Morrison dead drug overdose, except Sarah never touched drugs in her life. Rhea felt something cold settle in her stomach. How many? 7 dead in the past 3 years. I'm number 8. You're number 9. Doc, they know we're alive. They know we have evidence. They're coming for us." "Who is they?" Wolf pulled a USB drive from his pocket. "Harrow, Colonel Vincent Harrow, except he's not a colonel anymore. He's Deputy Director of Defense Logistics now. And he's been taking bribes from defense contractors for 20 years. $15 million. I've got proof. Emails, bank transfers, audio recordings, everything." He pressed the USB drive into her hand. "If something happens to me, you get this to the FBI. Not the MPS, not NCIS. They're compromised. FBI only, and you make damn sure it goes to someone clean. Davian, you need to go to them now. Don't wait for..." "I tried, 2 weeks ago. The agent I contacted dead. Heart attack at 42 with no history of cardiac issues. They're everywhere, Doc. Harrow has reach into NCIS, into the Pentagon, into places I can't even identify. The only reason I'm still alive is they don't know where I am. But they're looking, and they'll find me." Rhea gripped the USB drive. "Come with me. We'll find somewhere safe. We'll..." "No, you need to disappear. Change your routine. Don't go anywhere predictable. Trust no one you don't know from the old days. And if Marines in dress blues show up asking questions, you run. You understand me? You run." Davian. But he was already walking away, moving fast, despite his age and his pain, disappearing into the park's trees like smoke. Rhea stood there holding a USB drive that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She thought about throwing it away, about pretending this conversation never happened, about going back to her quiet life as a supply clerk, invisible and safe. She thought about Jackson Tate, 19 years old, bleeding in the sand in Fallujah, while she'd held pressure on his wounds and told him he was going to make it. He'd made it. He'd gone home. And 20 years later, someone had murdered him and made it look like an accident. She put the USB drive in her pocket. She went home. She did not sleep that night either. Sunday passed in a haze of normal activities that felt anything but normal. Grocery shopping, laundry. She did not call Mara. Did not tell her that there were people who might be willing to hurt a deployed naval officer to get to her mother. Did not tell her about USB drives or dead Marines or colonels who'd risen to positions of power while hiding the bodies of the men they'd sacrificed for their careers. Monday morning, Rhea returned to work at Mercy General. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. She clocked in, changed into her scrubs, collected her supply cart. At 11:30 p.m., the emergency room was relatively quiet. Dr. Olivia Pierce was on duty again, and she nodded to Rhea with a new respect that made Rhea uncomfortable. Word had spread about Friday night, about the supply clerk who'd saved a soldier's life with combat medicine techniques that no civilian should know. At 11:47 p.m., Rhea was in the supply room conducting inventory with her usual methodical precision when she heard the commotion at the ambulance bay. Loud voices, the crash of a gurney moving too fast. That particular quality of controlled panic that emergency medical services get when they're trying to save someone actively dying. She stepped out of the supply room. The gurney came through the doors, surrounded by paramedics. On it lay a man in civilian clothes, 50s, multiple stab wounds to the torso and chest, blood everywhere. His face was gray, his breathing was shallow and rapid. One of the paramedics was shouting the report. 57-year-old male found in an alley behind a bar on Colfax. Multiple stab wounds, probable liver lack, probable pneumothorax, lost a lot of blood at the scene. Rhea couldn't hear the rest. She was staring at the patient's face. Davian Wolf. Her hands gripped the doorframe. The world seemed to tilt sideways. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mugging. Someone had found him. Someone had tried to finish what they'd started 20 years ago when they'd left him and his unit to die in a Fallujah street. The trauma team moved Wolf to Bay 3. Dr. Pierce was calling orders, better than Friday, but still not good enough. The patient was crashing. Fast. Rhea forced herself to move. She walked to the trauma bay, not as staff, not as anyone official, just as the supply clerk, making sure the room had what it needed. No one questioned her presence. She was invisible again. She got close enough to see Wolf's face clearly. His eyes opened, wandered, found her. Recognition flashed. His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist with surprising strength for someone bleeding to death. "Doc," he whispered. "Callahan, they know you're alive. Harrow is cleaning up witnesses. Don't trust any Marines who come here. Don't trust anyone. Jackson is already dead. Davian, hold on. We're going to. The USB, you still have it?" "Yes." Don't let them take it. Promise me." "I promise." His grip relaxed, his eyes closed. The monitors began to alarm. "Doctor." Pierce was doing everything right this time, but sometimes right isn't enough. Sometimes the damage is too severe, the blood loss too massive, the time too short. Rhea stepped back, forced herself to remain calm, to be invisible, to just be the supply clerk who happened to witness a trauma. But her mind was racing. Wolf said Marines were coming, said not to trust them, said Harrow was cleaning up witnesses. If Wolf was right, if there was a systematic elimination of everyone who'd been in Fallujah on November 10th, 2004, then Rhea was next on the list. And if Marines showed up at this hospital, they wouldn't be coming to honor her service. They'd be coming to finish the job. At 11:15 p.m., the emergency room doors opened. 6 United States Marines in dress blues entered Mercy General Hospital. The Marines moved like a single organism, their polished shoes striking the linoleum floor in perfect synchronization. 6 men in dress blues, their uniforms immaculate, their bearing military perfect, their presence so utterly out of place in this civilian hospital that every conversation in the emergency room simply stopped mid-sentence. Patients looked up from their phones. Families stopped their worried whispers. Nurses froze with medications in hand. Even the monitors seemed to beat more quietly, as if the machines themselves recognized that something significant was happening. At the front of the formation walked Gunnery Sergeant Declan Kane. He was 62 years old, silver-haired, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and then weathered by 20 years of wind and sand. A scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, the kind of scar that shrapnel makes when it misses killing you by half an inch. His eyes swept the emergency room with the methodical precision of a man trained to assess threats, identify targets, and make life-or-death decisions in the space between heartbeats. Those eyes passed over Dr. Pierce, who stood frozen in the doorway of the trauma bay. They passed over the security guard, who'd instinctively moved his hand toward his radio. They passed over worried family members and tired nurses and the teenager with the skateboard injury, who was suddenly very aware that his problems were small compared to whatever this was. Then those eyes stopped. They locked onto a woman in faded blue scrubs standing near the supply room door. 58 years old, gray hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain, holding a clipboard like it was a shield, trying very hard to be invisible. Recognition flashed across Kane's face. Just for a moment, just long enough for someone who knew what to look for to see it. He'd found who he was looking for. The Marines began to move again, their formation adjusting with the fluid precision of men who trained together, fought together, trusted each other with their lives. They weren't walking toward the trauma bay where Davian Wolf lay dying. They weren't walking toward Dr. Pierce or the security guard or anyone else who might have expected military attention. They were walking toward the supply clerk that no one ever noticed. Rhea Callahan felt her heart rate spike. Every instinct she'd developed over 2 decades in combat zones started screaming at her to run, to fight, to do something other than stand there and wait for whatever was about to happen. But she'd also learned in those same combat zones that sometimes the only way to survive was to stay absolutely still and let the situation develop before committing to a course of action. She set down her clipboard with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't. She straightened her spine. Whatever was coming, she'd face it standing up. Kane stopped 6 feet away from her, close enough to speak without shouting, far enough to maintain a zone of control. The other 5 Marines formed a loose semicircle, not threatening, not aggressive, but very clearly establishing a perimeter. The entire emergency room watched, confused, fascinated, unable to look away. Kane's voice when he spoke was formal and cold. Military official. The voice of a man delivering a message he didn't particularly want to deliver, but would deliver anyway because orders were orders. Rhea Callahan, former hospital corpsman, 2nd Class United States Navy, attached to 2nd Battalion, 7th of Marines during Operation Phantom Fury, November 2004. It wasn't a question. Rhea said nothing. Her security clearance might be 2 decades expired, but some habits never die. When military personnel start asking questions, you confirm nothing until you know what they want. Kane continued. We need to discuss events that occurred on November 10, 2004, in Fallujah, Iraq. Specifically, events related to the deaths of 6 United States Marines and allegations of tactical protocol violations during that operation. The words fell like hammers, each one calculated, each one designed to establish authority, create pressure, make the subject understand the seriousness of the situation. Around them, the ER staff exchanged glances. Protocol violations. Deaths. This quiet woman who stocked supplies had been involved in something that brought Marines in dress blues to a civilian hospital 20 years later. Dr. Pierce stepped forward, finding courage she didn't know she had. Excuse me, what is this? This is a hospital. You can't just come in here and... Kane didn't even look at her. This is a matter of national security, ma'am. We'll need you to step back. National security? Dr. Pierce's voice rose. She's a nurse. She's my employee. She's a former Navy corpsman, Kane said flatly. And she's the subject of an ongoing investigation into events that are classified. I'm going to need you to step back now, Doctor. Elena Reeves, the young nurse who'd been so impressed by Rhea's skills 2 nights ago, grabbed Margaret Flynn's arm. What's happening? Why are they doing this to her? Margaret's face was grim. I don't know, but military doesn't send dress blues for parking tickets. Whatever this is, it's serious. Kane turned his attention back to Rhea. Corpsman Callahan, you have the right to remain silent. However, in the interest of resolving this matter efficiently, we'd prefer your cooperation. We need you to come with us to answer questions regarding no. The word was quiet, firm, absolute. Kane's eyebrow raised slightly. Excuse me. I said no, Gunnery Sergeant. I'm a civilian. I've been a civilian for 19 years. You have no authority over me. If you want to question me, you can go through proper legal channels. Until then, I'm going back to work. She reached for her clipboard. One of the Marines behind Kane shifted position slightly, not threatening, just ready. The tension in the emergency room became thick enough to cut. And then Kane did something unexpected. His hand moved to his pocket. He pulled out his phone, held it up so Rhea could see the screen. It was a photograph. Staff Sergeant Davian Wolf lying on a gurney in this very emergency room, blood everywhere, eyes closed. He was brought in 40 minutes ago, Kane said quietly. Multiple stab wounds. Someone tried to kill him tonight. Someone professional. Someone who knew exactly where to place the blade to cause maximum damage while making it look like a random mugging. Rhea's face didn't change, but something in her eyes did. Kane continued, his voice dropping even lower. Corpsman Callahan, we know about the others. Jackson Tate, Miguel Ramirez, Sarah Morrison. We know they're dead. We know the deaths were made to look like accidents. We know someone is systematically eliminating everyone who was present in Fallujah on November 10th, 2004, when Colonel Vincent Harrow gave the order that got 6 Marines killed. He paused. Let that sink in. We're not here to arrest you, Doc. We're here to protect you. The word Doc changed everything. It was the name Marines called their corpsmen, the title of respect, of trust, of brotherhood. Kane had just dropped the official military tone and spoken to her as one combat veteran to another. Rhea's eyes narrowed. If you're here to protect him, Gunnery Sergeant, why did you walk in here like you were conducting an interrogation? For the first time, Kane's expression shifted. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. Because this emergency room has cameras. It has staff who talk. It has security guards who file reports. We needed everyone in this room to believe we're here in an official capacity. We needed whoever's watching to think you're being questioned, detained, controlled. Who's watching? We don't know yet, but Wolf was found 45 minutes after he texted someone saying he was going to a specific bar. Someone knew exactly where to find him. Someone is monitoring communications, tracking movements, coordinating eliminations. And that someone has reach into military networks, law enforcement databases, and God knows where else. Rhea processed this. Her mind, trained by decades of making split-second decisions under pressure, ran through the implications. If Kane was telling the truth, then this performance was cover, protection disguised as investigation. But if he was lying, if he was part of the cleanup operation, then she was already dead and just didn't know it yet. The question was, which scenario was more likely? She looked at Kane's face. Really looked. Past the scar, past the military bearing, past the dress blues, she looked at his eyes, and she saw Fallujah. November 10th, 2004. A Marine Corps sergeant 20 years younger, bleeding from a leg wound, still returning fire while she worked on the man next to him, shouting at his Marines to hold position, refusing evacuation until everyone else was out first. That sergeant had made it home because Rhea had tied a tourniquet tight enough to save his life and loose enough not to cost him the leg. This man had those same eyes. "How did you find me?" she asked quietly. "You're not as invisible as you think, Doc. When Wolf turned up in Denver 3 days ago, we started looking at who else from that day might be in the area. Your name came up. Mercy General Hospital, Supply Services, night shift. We've been watching the hospital for 2 days, waiting to see if anyone else was watching it too. And someone was. White van, 3 different license plates, over 3 nights parked in the structure across the street. 2 occupants, military-age males, one with binoculars. They're gone now. Pulled out 20 minutes ago, right after Wolf was brought in. They're regrouping, planning. They'll be back." Rhea felt the weight of the USB drive in her pocket, the evidence Wolf had given her, the proof that could bring down a colonel turned Defense Department official along with everyone on his payroll. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "We want you alive," Kane said simply. "Everything else is secondary." Behind them, the trauma bay alarms went crazy. Someone shouted for Dr. Pierce. The chaos of a coding patient erupted across the emergency room. Davian Wolf was dying. Rhea turned toward the sound. Every instinct she had, every piece of training, every oath she'd taken when she'd become a corpsman, screamed at her to go help, to try to save him, to not let another one of her Marines die if there was even a chance she could prevent it. Kane's hand caught her arm, gentle but firm. "Doc, you can't. If you go in there and save him with the same skills you used Friday night, everyone in this room will know you're not just a supply clerk. They'll know you're combat trained. And whoever's watching will know you're important enough to protect, important enough to eliminate." "He's dying," Rhea said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were fixed on the trauma bay where Dr. Pierce was shouting orders and a code team was assembling. "I know, and I'm sorry, but if you save him now, you won't live long enough to make his death mean something. The evidence he gathered, the proof he died protecting, that's what matters now. That's how we honor him." Rhea's hand clenched into a fist. Everything in her wanted to reject that logic, to say that you didn't abandon a Marine, that you didn't make calculations about strategic value when someone was bleeding out 30 feet away. But she'd made those calculations before. In Fallujah, in Afghanistan, in every combat zone where resources were limited and choices were impossible, and sometimes the only way to save 3 lives was to let one die. The code alarm went steady, the flatline sound that meant a heart had stopped and wasn't coming back. Dr. Pierce's voice shaking. Time of death, 11:47 p.m. Davian Wolf was gone. Rhea closed her eyes, said a prayer she'd said too many times before, added another name to the list of Marines she'd failed to bring home. When she opened her eyes, Kane was watching her with understanding that only another combat veteran could have. He'd made those same calculations, lost those same friends, carried that same weight. "What happens now?" Rhea asked. "Now we get you somewhere safe, somewhere they won't think to look, somewhere we can coordinate with people we trust to start unraveling this conspiracy and getting the evidence to the right authorities. And if I say no, if I just want to go home and pretend this isn't happening," Kane's expression was grim, "then you'll be dead within 48 hours. They know you worked with Wolf. They know you were in this hospital when he died. They'll assume he passed information to you. They can't afford to let you live." Rhea looked around the emergency room, at Dr. Pierce devastated by another patient she couldn't save, at Elena watching everything with wide eyes, at Margaret, who'd seen enough in 30 years to know that sometimes the quiet ones had the deepest stories, at the life she'd built here, small, quiet, invisible, safe. Except it had never really been safe, had it? She'd just been pretending. Pretending the past was gone. Pretending that 20 years was long enough to erase what had happened in Fallujah. Pretending that men like Colonel Vincent Harrow didn't eliminate witnesses when their crimes threatened to catch up with them. "Where?" she asked. "For now, hospital conference room, secure, private. We need to debrief you on what Wolf told you, what evidence he passed you, and what our next steps are. Then we move you to a safe house. Rhea nodded, looked at Kane. You're sure you're not part of the cleanup operation? That this isn't an elaborate way to isolate me before you eliminate me? Kane met her eyes. Doc, if we wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. We're Marines. We don't do elaborate. We do mission-focused, efficient, and direct. This is messy and complicated, specifically because we're trying to keep you alive. It was oddly the most reassuring thing he could have said. Okay, Rhea said, but I need to clock out first. Tell my supervisor. I can't just disappear without already handled. One of the other Marines spoke up for the first time, younger, maybe 40, with the look of someone who handled logistics. Called your supervisor 20 minutes ago. Told him you had a family emergency. Navy chaplain is involved. He said take all the time you need. Rhea blinked. You called my supervisor before you even talked to me. We were confident you'd see reason, Kane said. And if I hadn't, then we'd have gotten creative. But we're not leaving you. Something in Rhea's chest, something that had been tight and closed since David's death 5 years ago, loosened slightly. Not much, but enough to remember what it felt like to have brothers and sisters in arms, to have people who understood without explanation, to not be alone. Conference room, she said. But if I see anything that makes me think you're lying, I'm gone. And Gunnery Sergeant, I might be 58 and I might walk with a limp, but I learned a few things besides medicine in my 20 years. Don't assume the old woman is helpless. Kane's expression was serious. Doc, I would never make that mistake. They moved through the emergency room in formation. Kane in front, Rhea in the middle, 5 Marines surrounding her like a protective detail. To anyone watching, it looked exactly like what Kane had wanted it to look like, a person of interest being escorted by military authorities for questioning. The conference room was on the 2nd floor away from the public areas. Kane checked it for cameras, covered the one he found with electrical tape, and positioned 2 Marines outside the door. Inside, just Kane, Rhea, and 2 other Marines. Kane gestured to a chair. Rhea remained standing. Talk, she said. Tell me everything. Kane pulled out a tablet, brought up a file, started with a name and a photograph. Colonel Vincent Harrow, now retired, currently serving as Deputy Director of Defense Logistics. Prior to that, 28 years active duty, multiple combat deployments, fast-tracked for advancement. On the surface, exemplary service record. He swiped to the next image. Below the surface, a pattern of intelligence failures, operations that went wrong, casualties that were always blamed on ground commanders. Fallujah was just one incident in a long chain. But Fallujah was different because Harrow made a critical mistake. What mistake? He forgot to eliminate all the witnesses. 6 Marines died in that ambush. 11 survived because of you. He assumed that survivors traumatized by combat scattered across different units after the battle would never compare notes. Never realize the pattern. Never understand that the ambush wasn't bad luck or bad intel, it was deliberate. Kane brought up another series of photos. Dead Marines, accident reports, death certificates. But 3 years ago, one of those survivors, Jackson Tate, started asking questions, started connecting with others from that day, started gathering evidence. Bank records showing deposits Harrow couldn't explain. Emails between Harrow and defense contractors. Audio files of radio communications from that day in Fallujah. Rhea's hand went to her pocket. The USB drive felt like it was burning through the fabric. Kane noticed the gesture. Wolf gave you something, didn't he? She didn't answer directly. You said people were being eliminated. How many? 7 confirmed dead, all made to look like accidents or natural causes, car crashes, house fires, heart attacks, drug overdoses. Each one investigated, each one closed as accidental or self-inflicted. But when you look at all 7 together, when you see that all 7 were present in Fallujah on November 10th, 2004, the statistical probability of it being coincidence is essentially 0. And you think Harrow is behind it? We think Harrow is at the center of a conspiracy that includes NC, IS agents, military police, possibly CIA contractors, and enough reach into federal databases to track veterans across the country. We think he's protecting a corruption network that's been stealing from defense budgets for 20 years. We think the Fallujah incident was just one of many times he sacrificed troops to cover up his failures or protect his side income. One of the other Marines spoke up, older, maybe 50, with eyes that had seen things. Doc, we're talking about billions of dollars over 2 decades. Fraudulent contracts, kickbacks, equipment that was never delivered, units sent into combat with faulty gear because someone padded a budget and pocketed the difference. Harrow didn't just betray one unit in Fallujah, he betrayed thousands of troops over his entire career. Rhea felt sick. And you have proof of this. Wolf had proof. Documentation that he'd been gathering for 3 years. We think he stored it in multiple locations, gave copies to different people. We know he had at least one USB drive with key evidence. And we know that right before he was attacked tonight, he met with someone. We're guessing that someone was you. Rhea pulled the USB drive from her pocket, set it on the table. Kane looked at it like it was a live grenade. Jesus, he actually gave it to you. He said if something happened to him, get it to the FBI. Not MPS, not NCIS. Someone clean. He was right about that. NCIS has been compromised. We have evidence that at least 3 agents are on Harrow's payroll. They're the ones who've been making the deaths look accidental, who've been suppressing investigations, who've been feeding Harrow information about where the survivors are and what they're doing. One of those 3 agents walked into the emergency room 30 seconds later. Her name was Isabel Brennan. She was 32 years old, blonde, athletic, with the kind of face that belonged in fitness commercials. She'd been working at Mercy General for 4 weeks under the cover identity of a traveling nurse from Seattle. Her real job was NCIS Special Agent. Her actual job was eliminating threats to Colonel Vincent Harrow's freedom. She walked into the ER with a confident stride, flashed a badge at the security guard, and asked in a pleasant voice where she could find the staff member who'd been taken for questioning by the Marines. The security guard, flustered by all the military attention, tonight pointed toward the elevators. Second floor, conference room B. Isabel smiled, thanked him, headed for the stairs instead of the elevator, because stairs gave you options that elevators didn't. She reached the second floor, saw 2 Marines in dress blues standing outside a conference room door, approached with her badge out and her smile confident. Special Agent Brennan, NCIS. I'm here regarding the Wolf investigation. I'll need to speak with the subject you are holding. The Marines looked at each other, looked at her badge, didn't move. Ma'am, we have orders not to allow anyone into this room, one of them said politely. I understand, but NCIS has jurisdiction over this matter. The subject is wanted for questioning in a federal investigation. I'll need you to step aside. Ma'am, with respect, we're going to need you to take that up with Gunnery Sergeant Kane. He's inside with... Isabel's hand moved toward her in a waistband. Not fast, not threatening, just a subtle shift that made both Marines tense. The door opened. Kane stepped out, looked at Isabel, looked at her hand position. His expression didn't change, but his voice got very flat. Special Agent Brennan, what brings NCIS to a civilian hospital at midnight? The same thing that brings Marines in dress blues, Gunnery Sergeant. The Wolf incident. I'm here to coordinate the investigation. There's no investigation. Wolf died of stab wounds sustained in an apparent mugging. Denver PD has jurisdiction. NCIS has no standing. Wolf was a Marine veteran. That gives us standing. Wolf was a retired Marine veteran. Keyword retired. Civilian. Not our jurisdiction. Not yours either. Isabel's smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. I'm going to need to speak with the subject you removed from the emergency room. Rhea Callahan. She may have information relevant to an ongoing federal investigation. Ms. Callahan is cooperating voluntarily with a preliminary inquiry. When we're done, she's free to go. If NCIS wants to schedule an interview, you can contact her through her attorney. She doesn't have an attorney. She will by morning. Now, unless you have a warrant, I'm going to ask you to leave. The standoff lasted 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Isabel assessed her options. 2 Marines outside the door, Kane blocking the entrance. Unknown number of additional Marines inside. Security cameras in the hallway. Hospital staff potentially watching. No clean way to eliminate the target without creating a scene that would raise too many questions. She stepped back. I'll be in touch, Gunnery Sergeant. You do that, Agent. Isabel walked away. Down the stairs, out of the hospital, into the parking garage where a white van waited with 2 men inside. Status, the driver asked. Marines have her, at least 6 of them, armed, organized. They know something. Can we extract her? Not here, too many witnesses. Too much security. We need to wait until they move her. Track them, hit them en route. The driver pulled out a phone, made a call. When someone answered, he said simply, Sir, we have a complication. Colonel Vincent Harrow's voice came through the speaker. Calm, cold. Define complication, Sean. Marines are protecting Callahan. Gunnery Sergeant Declan Kane is leading them. He's one of the Fallujah survivors. A long pause. Then, Kane should have died with the others. Eliminate him. Eliminate all of them. Eliminate anyone who gets in the way. No witnesses, no survivors, no evidence. Do you understand? Yes, sir. And the USB drive Wolf was carrying, we didn't find it on his body. We think he passed it to Callahan before he died. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Callahan is the priority. Get that drive. Destroy it. Destroy her. I don't care how messy it gets. This ends tonight. The line went dead. Inside the conference room, Kane returned to find Rhea standing by the window looking out at the parking garage across the street. We have a problem, he said. I know, Rhea replied. She'd seen the white van, seen Isabel Brennan get into it, seen the way the occupants had immediately pulled out phones and started making calls. They're not going to wait, Kane said. They're going to hit us as soon as we try to move you. Then we don't move, Rhea said. We stay here. Hospital is public. Lots of witnesses. Lots of security. They can't make a move without creating a scene. They'll wait us out. We can't stay here forever. Rhea turned from the window. Then we don't wait. We go on offense. We get this evidence to the FBI now tonight before they can stop us. How they're watching the exits, they'll follow us, and we don't know who at the FBI we can trust. Rhea pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts, found a name she hadn't called in 3 years. Dr. Brennan Sutherland, Director of Emergency Medicine, former Navy surgeon, Gulf War veteran, one of the few people in this hospital who'd looked at Rhea and seen more than just a supply clerk. She dialed. He answered on the second ring. Callahan, it's almost midnight. Is everything? Dr. Sutherland, I need your help. It's going to sound crazy, but I need you to trust me. A pause. Then, what do you need? And Rhea Callahan, 58-year-old supply clerk and invisible woman, began to explain exactly how far she was willing to go to honor the Marines who died protecting evidence that could bring down a corruption network 20 years in the making. Dr. Brennan Sutherland arrived at Conference Room B 7 minutes after Rhea's call. He didn't knock. He walked in like he owned the place, which in a sense he did. This was his hospital, his emergency room, his staff. And when one of his people called asking for help, he came. He stopped just inside the doorway, taking in the scene. 6 Marines in dress blues. Rhea Callahan standing by the window with the look of someone who'd made a decision and was preparing to live with the consequences. A USB drive on the conference table that everyone kept glancing at like it might explode. Dr. Sutherland, Kane said, straightening to attention automatically. Old habits. Sutherland waved him down. At ease, gunnery sergeant. Rhea, you want to tell me why my supply clerk is surrounded by Marines and being hunted by people who just killed a patient in my emergency room? You know Wolf was murdered, Rhea asked. I've been an emergency physician for 30 years. I know what defensive wounds look like. I know what a professional hit looks like. Those weren't random stab wounds. Someone knew exactly where to cut to cause maximum damage while avoiding immediate death. They wanted him to suffer. They wanted him to have time to think about what was happening before he died. Sutherland moved into the room, closed the door behind him. I also know that the nurse who's been asking questions about you for the past 2 weeks isn't actually a nurse, Isabel Brennan. Her credentials are fake. Good fakes, but fake. I reported it to hospital security 3 days ago. They're still looking into it. Kane's expression sharpened. You knew she was undercover. I served in the first Gulf War. Navy surgeon. I learned to recognize operators when I see them. She moves wrong, looks at people wrong, asks questions that medical staff wouldn't ask. He turned to Rhea. I also know you're not really a supply clerk. Friday night proved that. You have combat medicine training, extensive training, the kind that doesn't come from textbooks. Rhea met his eyes. Navy hospital corpsman, 20 years, Iraq and Afghanistan. I thought I left that behind when I retired. Some things you don't leave behind. They follow you home. Sutherland pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. So what do you need from me? Kane answered. We need to get evidence to the FBI. Evidence that proves a senior Defense Department official has been running a corruption network for 2 decades and eliminating witnesses. But the people hunting Rhea are watching the hospital. They'll follow us if we try to leave. They'll kill us if they get the chance. We need a way to move the evidence without moving Rhea. Why not just email it, upload it somewhere? Because we don't know how deep the surveillance goes. If they're monitoring communications, an email gets intercepted. If they have access to cloud services, uploads get deleted. We need physical custody, hand-to-hand transfer to someone we're absolutely certain isn't compromised. Sutherland thought for a moment. I have a friend, FBI Field Office White Collar Crimes Division. We served together in '91. I trust him with my life. Hell, I did trust him with my life more than once. Can you get him here tonight? I can try. Sutherland pulled out his phone, then paused. But if these people are watching, they'll see an FBI agent enter the hospital. They'll know what's happening. Not if he comes in as a patient, Rhea said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She continued, her mind working through the logistics with the same methodical precision she'd used to triage mass casualties under fire. Ambulance entrance. Bring him in on a stretcher. Chest pain, possible cardiac event. Perfectly legitimate emergency. We examine him in the ER and find nothing serious. Keep him for observation. While he's here, the evidence changes hands. He leaves in the morning with the USB drive. No one's the wiser. Kane nodded slowly. That could work, if your friend is willing to fake a medical emergency. Sutherland smiled grimly. Jack owes me for the time I covered for him when he accidentally shot himself in the foot during training. Trust me, he'll do it. He made the call. The conversation was brief, coded in the way that old military friends communicate when they know the line might not be secure. When he hung up, Sutherland said, he'll be here in 40 minutes. Ambulance entrance, chest pain, and shortness of breath. His partner will drive him in their personal vehicle, follow behind to maintain cover. Good happen, Kane said. Now we need to address the immediate problem. They're watching us. They know Rhea has the evidence. They're planning something. As if on cue, Kane's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression went dark. We've got movement. One of my men outside spotted the white van repositioning. They're no longer in the parking garage. They're on the street, south side, with direct line of sight to the ambulance bay. They're waiting to see if we try to move her, one of the other Marines said. If we do, they'll follow. Hit us somewhere between here and wherever we're going. Rhea walked back to the window. She could just barely see the street from this angle. The white van was there, parked illegally in a loading zone, hazard lights on, like they were making a delivery. 2 men visible in the front seats, probably a third in the back, all watching, all waiting. We need a distraction, she said. What kind of distraction? Kane asked. Rhea turned from the window and everyone in the room saw the shift in her demeanor. The supply clerk was gone. In her place stood someone who'd spent 20 years making impossible decisions in impossible situations. Someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to win was to change the rules of engagement. The kind that makes them think they've already won, she said. The kind that makes them commit their resources to the wrong target while we move the real asset to safety. She laid out the plan. It was risky. It required perfect timing. It required people to put themselves in danger to protect evidence they'd never seen about crimes they'd only just learned about. It required trust. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Kane smiled. Doc, you always did have a gift for creative, tactical solutions. Let's do it. The next 30 minutes were a carefully choreographed ballet of misdirection and preparation. Dr. Sutherland returned to the ER and pulled Elena Reeves aside. I need you to trust me, he told the young nurse, and I need you to do something that's going to seem very strange. Elena, who'd been watching the drama unfold all night and understood that something significant was happening, even if she didn't understand the details, nodded. What do you need? In 20 minutes, I need you to help me load a patient into a private vehicle for transfer. A patient who looks a lot like Rhea Callahan. Similar build, similar age, gray hair. We're going to make it look like the Marines are moving her out of the hospital covertly. But it won't actually be her. Elena's eyes widened. Who will it be? Me, said Margaret Flynn, stepping up beside Sutherland. The older nurse had been listening from nearby, and her face held the determined expression of someone who'd made a decision. I'm 58, same as Rhea, similar height, in dim light from a distance, wearing her jacket and keeping my head down. I could pass for her long enough to draw out whoever's watching. Margaret, this could be dangerous, Sutherland warned. I spent 30 years in this ER. I've been spit on, punched, threatened, and once had a patient pull a knife on me. I'm not afraid of danger, and I'm not going to stand by while they hunt down a woman who saved a soldier's life right in front of us. What do you need me to do? The plan came together. Margaret borrowed Rhea's jacket, the one she kept in her locker for cold nights. She pulled her hair back in the same style Rhea wore. From behind, from a distance, the resemblance was good enough. Kane positioned his Marines. 2 would stay with Rhea in the conference room. 2 would escort Margaret and make a show of trying to be covert while actually ensuring they were highly visible. The remaining 2 would watch the hospital exits and track the white van's response. At 12:35 a.m., the performance began. Kane and one of his Marines escorted Margaret out of the hospital through the staff entrance on the east side. They moved quickly, but not too quickly. Alertly, but not too alertly. Like men trying to be sneaky, but not quite managing it. Margaret kept her head down, wore Ria's jacket, walked with a slight limp that she exaggerated just enough to match the way Ria moved after a long shift. They reached a dark sedan parked in the staff lot, got Margaret into the back seat. Kane took the driver's seat. They pulled out heading west on Colfax Avenue. The white van waited exactly 30 seconds before following. Inside the conference room, one of the Marines monitoring the situation via phone connection to his partners reported, "They took the bait. Van is in pursuit. 3 occupants confirmed. They're staying back, maintaining distance, but they're definitely following." Ria let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. How long until they realize it's not me? Depends on when they decide to make their move. Could be 5 minutes, could be 20. Kane will lead them on a chase through the city, keep them occupied as long as possible. When they finally get close enough to see it's not you, he'll have backup waiting. Denver PD is already positioning units along the route, though they don't know exactly why. They just know a federal investigation is underway and they're providing support. What about Kane and Margaret if these people are willing to kill witnesses? Kane knows the risks, and he's got more backup than the people following him realize. We didn't come to Denver alone. There are 15 more Marines in civilian clothes scattered around this city, all of them combat veterans, all loyal to the men who died in Fallujah. This isn't just an extraction operation, it's an ambush. Ria understood. Kane hadn't just come to protect her. He'd come to finish what Davian Wolf had started, to bring down the people responsible for 20 years of corruption and murder, to make sure that the Marines who died both in Fallujah and in the staged accidents since hadn't died for nothing. At 12:47 a.m., an ambulance pulled into the Mercy General Emergency Bay. The paramedics wheeled in a man in his late 50s, conscious but clutching his chest, complaining of crushing pain and shortness of breath. Classic heart attack symptoms. The ER team sprang into action with practiced efficiency. The man's name, according to his ID, was John McKenzie. In reality, he was FBI Special Agent Jack McKenzie, White Collar Crimes Division, and the chest pain was completely fictitious. But he sold it well. 30 years of undercover work had taught him how to play a role convincingly. Dr. Sutherland personally took charge of the case, ordered all the right tests, had Agent McKenzie moved to a private examination room. And once the door was closed and the curtain drawn, the performance ended. "Jack," Sutherland said quietly, "thanks for coming. Brennan, you pull me out of bed at midnight claiming you have evidence of Defense Department corruption and you need it moved under the noses of people conducting active surveillance. I come. What the hell have you gotten yourself into?" "Not me, one of my staff. Former Navy corpsman. She was given evidence by a dying Marine. That evidence proves that Colonel Vincent Harrow has been running a corruption network for 2 decades. Mackenzie's eyebrows rose. "Vincent Harrow, the deputy director." "The same." "Jesus, that's not just corruption. That's a conspiracy that goes all the way to the Pentagon. Do you have any idea how many people he could have on his payroll, how deep this could go? That's why we need you. Someone outside the military chain of command, someone we can trust." There was a soft knock on the examination room door. It opened to reveal Ria escorted by the 2 Marines who'd been guarding her. She looked tired. She looked old. But her eyes held the steady determination of someone who'd made peace with what needed to be done. "Agent McKenzie," she said. "My name is Ria Callahan. 20 years ago, I watched 6 Marines die because a corrupt officer sent them into an ambush. Since then, 7 more have been murdered to cover up that crime. I'm probably next on the list. But before they kill me, I need to make sure this evidence reaches someone who will actually do something with it." She pulled the USB drive from her pocket, held it out. Mackenzie took it carefully like he was handling a live grenade. "What's on here?" "Everything. Financial records, emails, audio recordings, bank transfers, a paper trail connecting Harrow to defense contractors who paid him millions in bribes over 20 years. Communications showing he deliberately sent troops into danger to cover up intelligence failures. Documentation of the systematic elimination of witnesses. The man who gave this to me spent 3 years compiling it. He died tonight, making sure I got it. I'll need to verify it, run it through our forensics team, build a prosecutable case. How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe months. These things don't move fast." "I don't have weeks," Ria said flatly. "They know I have the evidence. They'll keep coming until I'm dead or they have it back. Every day I'm alive is a day they're hunting me." Mackenzie looked at Sutherland, then at the Marines, then back at Rhea. I can offer you protective custody, witness protection protocols. We move you to a secure location, keep you under guard until the case is ready. For how long? However long it takes. Rhea shook her head. No, I'm not hiding. I'm not running. I've spent 19 years trying to be invisible, trying to pretend the war didn't follow me home. I'm done hiding. Then what do you want? I want to testify publicly, on record. I want to stand up in front of whoever needs to hear it and tell them exactly what Vincent Harrow did. I want the families of the Marines who died to know that their sons and husbands and fathers didn't die because of bad luck or bad intelligence. They died because a corrupt officer sacrificed them to protect his career. I want justice, real justice, not a quiet plea deal and early retirement. I want him in prison. The room was silent for a moment. Then Mackenzie smiled. It was a grim smile, but genuine. Mrs. Callahan, I think you and I are going to get along just fine. Give me 72 hours to verify this evidence and brief my superiors. Then we'll bring you in for a formal deposition. After that, we start building the case. And when we're ready, we'll make enough noise that Harrow won't be able to make you disappear without every news organization in the country asking questions. 72 hours is a long time to stay alive when people are actively trying to kill you, one of the Marines pointed out. Which is why she won't be staying here, Mackenzie said. Dr. Sutherland, how long can you keep me admitted for observation? Heart attack protocol is usually 24 hours minimum. I could stretch it to 48 if needed. Do that. And during those 48 hours, Mrs. Callahan is going to be my private duty nurse. She'll stay in this room caring for me around the clock. As far as anyone knows, she's pulled a double shift because we're short-staffed. Nothing suspicious, nothing worth noticing. Just an old nurse doing her job. Rhea considered this. It was smart. The hospital was public, well-lit, full of witnesses. Her presence would be explained. And if anyone came looking for her, they'd have to go through hospital security, multiple floors of staff, and an FBI agent who, even while faking a heart attack, was probably armed. It could work, she admitted. It'll work, Mackenzie said with confidence. Now someone needs to actually examine me so this looks legitimate. Doc, if you'd do the honors. For the next hour, Mercy General Hospital ran its tests on a patient who had nothing wrong with him, while a woman who'd spent 20 years being invisible, hid in plain sight, protected by the simple cover story that she was doing her job. At 1:43 a.m., Kane called. They made us, realized it was a decoy. Van broke off pursuit about 10 minutes ago. We've lost visual on them. Are Margaret and your team safe? Rhea asked. Everyone's fine. Margaret's actually enjoying herself. Apparently, this is the most exciting thing that's happened to her since 1987. She wants to know if she can keep the jacket. Mom, despite everything, Rhea smiled. Tell her yes. What's your status? Secure. I'm staying with Agent Mackenzie for the next 48 hours, while the FBI verifies the evidence. After that, we go on offense. Good, because we got some intel while we were leading that van on a wild chase through Denver. One of my Marines tracked it back to a rental company. Rented 3 days ago by a woman named Isabel Brennan using NCIS credentials. When we ran her through some unofficial channels, turns out she's not just dirty. She's been dirty for 5 years. Part of a unit that specializes in making problems disappear. She's killed at least 4 people, we can confirm, probably more, we can't. And now she knows we're onto her, Rhea said, which means she's going to escalate. She can't afford to let you live long enough to testify. She's going to come at you hard and fast, probably in the next 24 to 48 hours. Before the FBI can move you into formal protective custody, before you can give your official statement. Let her come, Rhea said quietly. I've been running from ghosts for 5 years. I've been invisible for 19 years. I'm done running. I'm done being invisible. Kane was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Doc, I'm positioning Marines around the hospital. Not in uniform. Civilian clothes. They'll blend in. Visitors, family members, maintenance workers. If Brennan comes, she'll be walking into a kill zone and she won't even know it. Kane, I don't want civilian casualties. This hospital has patients, families, children. Which is why we're going to keep this contained. Trust me, Doc. We've been planning for this scenario since the moment we knew you were a target. We're not going to let innocents get hurt, but we're also not going to let that woman kill you. After Kane hung up, Rhea sat in the quiet examination room, watching Agent Mackenzie pretend to sleep. Doctor? Sutherland had returned to his normal duties, managing the ER with his usual competence. The hospital around them continued its never-ending rhythm of healing and dying, of saving and losing of all the small dramas and large tragedies that emergency rooms witness every single night. Rhea thought about the Marines who'd died in Fallujah, about the witnesses who'd been murdered to protect a corrupt officer's secrets, about Davian Wolf, who'd spent his last moments trying to warn her about the danger coming her way. She thought about David, her husband, who'd survived 3 tours of combat only to die alone in a garage because the system that sent him to war didn't care enough to help him come home whole. She thought about all the invisible people, the forgotten warriors, the quiet heroes who'd served and sacrificed and returned to a country that had already moved on to the next headline, the next crisis, the next war. And she made a decision. She wasn't going to be quiet anymore. She wasn't going to be invisible. When this was over, when Hera was in prison and the corruption network was exposed and the murders were avenged, she was going to speak. She was going to tell the stories that needed telling. She was going to make sure that the Marines who died in Fallujah and all the others who'd been sacrificed to protect careers and cover up crimes were remembered not as statistics, but as human beings who deserved better. At 3:17 a.m., Elena Reeves knocked softly on the examination room door. "Mrs. Callahan, there's someone here asking for you. Says she's your niece from Seattle. I told her you were on duty, but she says it's urgent. Family emergency." Rhea went very still. What does she look like? Blonde, athletic, late 20s, maybe early 30s? She seemed, I don't know, something felt off about her. Isabel Brennan had just walked into the hospital. Rhea stood up. Agent Mackenzie's eyes opened. He was no longer pretending to sleep. His hand had moved to his ankle where she now saw he had a backup weapon strapped in a holster. "Get everyone out of this hallway," Rhea told Elena quietly. "Right now. Find a reason. Fire drill, suspicious smell, anything. Clear this floor of non-essential personnel." "What's happening?" "Elena, I need you to trust me. Just like you trusted me Friday night when I stepped in to help with that soldier. Get people clear. Do it now." Elena looked at Rhea's face, saw something there that made her stop asking questions and nodded. "I'll pull the fire alarm in the south wing. That'll evacuate this whole section of the floor." She left. 30 seconds later, alarms began to ring. Mackenzie was on his phone speaking quickly and quietly to someone. "This is Mackenzie. I need immediate backup at Mercy General Hospital, second floor room 247, armed subject federal investigation civilians in the area. Get me every available agent within 10 minutes of this location." He hung up. He hung, looked at Rhea. "FBI response time is 8 to 12 minutes. If she comes now, it's just us." "And about a dozen Marines who are already in the building," Rhea reminded him. "Can they get here in time?" "Let's hope so." The fire alarm continued its insistent ringing. People began moving in the hallways. Orderly evacuation. Staff helping patients who could walk, preparing to move those who couldn't. The well-practiced routine of a hospital that had drilled for this scenario countless times. Isabel Brennan moved against the flow. While everyone else headed toward the exits, she walked calmly toward room 247. She had a visitor's badge clipped to her jacket, a smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes, and a gun with a suppressor hidden in the large purse she carried. She'd studied the hospital layout. She knew the security camera positions. She knew that the fire alarm would cause enough chaos to cover a quick in-and-out operation. She knew that Rhea Callahan was somewhere on this floor, probably in a private room, probably lightly guarded, if guarded at all. What she didn't know was that every visitor and family member she'd passed in the hallways was a Marine combat veteran. What she didn't know was that the maintenance worker fixing a light fixture down the hall was a Marine Scout sniper with 3 tours in Afghanistan. What she didn't know was that she'd just walked into a trap. She reached room 247, put her hand on the door handle. A voice behind her, calm and professional. "Ma'am, you need to evacuate. Fire alarm protocol. Everyone out of the building." She turned. A security guard, young, probably not a threat. She smiled. "I just need to check on my aunt. She's a patient here. It'll just take a second." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but protocol says..." Isabel's hand moved, not toward her purse, toward a pressure point on the guard's neck. A non-lethal takedown that would render him unconscious in seconds. She'd done this dozens of times, but the guard moved too, faster than a hospital security guard should move, with combat reflexes that spoke of training far beyond what civilians received. He blocked her strike, reversed the hold, had her arm twisted behind her back before she could react. "NCIS Special Agent Isabel Brennan," he said quietly. "You're under arrest for the murder of Staff Sergeant Davian Wolf and conspiracy to commit murder against Rhea Callahan. You have the right to remain silent." He wasn't a security guard, he was a Marine in a security guard's uniform. And Isabel had just made her first mistake. She tried to fight, went for the gun in her purse with her free hand, got halfway there before two more visitors appeared from nearby rooms, both of them moving with the coordinated precision of operators who'd worked together before. One secured her weapon. The other put her in handcuffs that had appeared from nowhere. The door to room 247 opened. Rhea stepped out. She looked at Isabel, this woman who'd been hunting her, who'd killed Wolf, who'd probably killed 7 other veterans to protect a corrupt colonel's secrets. "I'm sorry it ended this way," Rhea said quietly. "I'm sorry you made the choices you made. I hope someday you find whatever peace you can with what you've done." Isabel stared at her with cold hatred. "He'll kill you anyway. Harrow has reach you can't imagine, resources you can't comprehend. You think catching me stops this? You think arresting me changes anything? He'll send others, and others after them. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder waiting for the bullet you won't see coming." "Maybe," Rhea said, "but at least I'll spend that life standing up instead of hiding. At least I'll spend it knowing I did everything I could to get justice for the people who died. That's more peace than you'll ever have." FBI agents arrived 6 minutes later. They took custody of Isabel Brennan, read her rights again officially, and began the process that would eventually lead to her prosecution for multiple counts of murder. Agent Mackenzie, no longer pretending to be a heart attack patient, coordinated with Denver PD to lock down the hospital while they swept for any additional threats. And Rhea Callahan, invisible woman supply clerk, forgotten veteran, stood in the hallway of Mercy General Hospital, surrounded by Marines who'd come to protect her, and realized that she just won the first major battle in a war she'd been avoiding for 20 years. But the war wasn't over. Isabel was right about one thing: Harrow wouldn't stop. He had too much to lose, too many crimes to hide, too much money at stake. He would try to send others, and Rhea would be ready. 2 weeks later, Rhea sat in a conference room at FBI headquarters in Denver. Across from her sat 3 agents, 2 attorneys, and a video camera recording every word. Agent Mackenzie had verified the evidence on the USB drive. The case was real. The crimes were documented. And now they needed Rhea's testimony to put all the pieces together. She told them everything about Fallujah, about the ambush, about listening to Colonel Harrow deliberately send Marines into a kill zone, about recording his radio communications, about the 11 Marines she'd saved and the 6 she couldn't, about 20 years of watching survivors die in staged accidents, about Davy and Wolf bleeding out in her emergency room after trying to deliver evidence that could bring down a corruption network. She talked for 4 hours. When she was done, the lead attorney sat back and said, "Mrs. Callahan, what you've given us is enough to indict Colonel Harrow on multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, fraud, and corruption. It's enough to open investigations into dozens of defense contractors and potentially hundreds of military personnel who were part of this network. This is going to be the biggest military corruption case in decades." "When?" Rhea asked. "When what? When do you arrest him? We need to build the case carefully, coordinate with military prosecutors, ensure we have everything documented, probably 6 to 8 weeks before." "No," Rhea said firmly. "No more delays, no more careful coordination. Every day you wait is another day Harrow has to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, or eliminate threats. You have everything you need right now. Arrest him today." The attorney looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Callahan, I understand your frustration, but these things take time. We can't just—" "Yes, you can," Agent Mackenzie said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "We have probable cause. We have evidence. We have a witness willing to testify under oath. We can get an arrest warrant this afternoon if we prioritize it. The case building can happen after he's in custody. Right now, the priority should be securing the target before he flees or destroys evidence." The attorney hesitated, then nodded. "I'll make the calls." 4 hours later, FBI agents arrested Colonel Vincent Harrow at his home in Arlington, Virginia. He was having dinner with his wife when they came. He barely resisted, just sat there with a glass of wine in his hand and said, "I want my attorney." The news broke that night. Major Defense Department official arrested on corruption charges. Networks ran footage of Harrow in handcuffs being led to a federal vehicle. Reporters scrambled to understand the scope of the investigation. By morning, 3 more arrests had been made. NCIS agents on Harrow's payroll. By the end of the week, 17 people were in custody. By the end of the month, the number had climbed to 43. The scandal rocked the Pentagon. Congressional hearings were announced. Investigations opened into defense contracts going back 15 years. Families of dead Marines started asking questions about accidents that maybe weren't accidents after all. And through it all, Rhea Callahan remained quiet. She gave her testimony, answered questions when asked, but otherwise returned to her life in Denver. Except her life wasn't quite the same anymore. 2 months after Harrow's arrest, Rhea received a call from Dr. Sutherland. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "The hospital board approved funding for a new program, combat medicine training for civilian emergency responders. We want to teach paramedics, ER nurses, and doctors the kind of field medicine techniques that military corpsmen learn, the kind of skills that save lives when everything goes wrong and protocol doesn't work." "That sounds like a good program," Rhea said carefully. "It needs a director, someone with actual combat experience, someone who can teach not just the techniques but the mindset, someone who knows what it's like to make life or death decisions under pressure." "Dr. Sutherland, the position comes with a significant pay increase, full-time benefits, office with a window, and most importantly, no more pretending to be invisible. I'm tired of watching you hide in supply closets when you should be teaching the next generation of emergency medicine professionals how to save lives." Rhea was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "When do I start? How about Monday?" The training program started small, just 6 students in the first class, paramedics and nurses who wanted to learn advanced trauma care. Rhea taught them how to perform needle decompressions, how to place tourniquets under pressure, how to triage mass casualties when resources were limited and time was shorter. She taught them not just the skills, but the philosophy, that sometimes protocol doesn't work, that sometimes you have to make impossible choices, that sometimes the only way to save lives is to be willing to break rules, take risks, and trust your training even when everyone around you is panicking. Word spread. Then, the second class had 20 students. The third had 40. Within a year, the program was training emergency responders from across Colorado. Within 2 years, hospitals in other states were asking Rhea to come teach. The quiet supply clerk who no one had noticed was suddenly in demand as an expert in combat trauma care. And through it all, Kane kept in touch. He'd call every few weeks to check in, to tell her about the investigation's progress, to share news about other Fallujah survivors who were finally getting the recognition they deserved. "The Navy's reviewing your service record," he told her one day. "Apparently, when you saved 11 Marines in Fallujah, your commanding officer recommended you for the Navy Cross, but it got lost in bureaucratic shuffle. Someone in the Pentagon is pushing to approve it retroactively. I don't need a medal, Kane. I know you don't, but the families of the Marines you saved need to know that someone tried to honor what you did. They need to know that even when the system failed, even when corrupt officers tried to bury the truth, there were people who did the right thing." The Navy Cross ceremony was held on a Thursday in November, 20 years after the battle that had earned it. Rhea wore her old uniform tailored to fit a body that was 59 years old instead of 38. The ceremony was at Mercy General Hospital in the auditorium where Rhea now taught her classes. It wasn't a small ceremony. 45 Marines who'd served in Fallujah and survived came in dress blues. Dr. Sutherland was there, Elena and Margaret, the entire ER staff, and at the back of the room a young Marine who couldn't have been more than 22. When the Admiral pinned the medal to her chest and read the citation describing her actions on November 10, 2004, Rhea didn't cry. She'd cried enough over the years, for David, for the Marines who'd died, for all the invisible people who'd served and sacrificed and never received the recognition. Instead, she stood at attention and accepted the honor on behalf of every corpsman who'd ever run toward danger instead of away from it. Every medic who'd put others before themselves, every quiet professional who'd done their job without seeking glory. After the official ceremony ended, after the Admiral had left and the formalities were complete, Gunnery Sergeant Declan Kane stepped forward. He looked at the other Marines in the room, nodded once. As one, all 45 Marines came to attention. Kane's voice carried across the auditorium. "Hospital Corpsman Second Class Rhea Callahan. On November 10, 2004 in Fallujah, Iraq, you saved 11 United States Marines while under sustained enemy fire. You ran through active combat zones 8 times. You used your body to shield wounded Marines from mortar fire. You performed emergency medical procedures under conditions that would have broken lesser people. You are the reason 11 Marines came home to their families. You are the reason we're all standing here today." He paused. The entire auditorium was silent. "On behalf of the United States Marine Corps and every Marine whose life you touched, we want to say what should have been said 20 years ago. Thank you, Doc. Semper Fi." All 45 Marines raised their hands in salute. Rhea stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak. Around her, the hospital staff watched in stunned silence. Dr. Sutherland smiled from his position by the door. Elena Reeves and Margaret Flynn held each other's hands, both crying. Rhea straightened her spine, raised her hand to return the salute. And in that moment, surrounded by the Marines she'd saved and the hospital staff who'd become her new family, Rhea Callahan was finally truly no longer invisible. She was seen. She was honored. She was home. The salute held for 10 long seconds. Then Kane dropped his hand. But he wasn't done. The young Marine from the back of the room approached, nervous, respectful. He held out a small box. "Ma'am, my name is Corporal Ryan Tate. Jackson Tate was my uncle. He died in 2021. Car accident, they said. But after everything came out about Harrow, my family started asking questions. The FBI says he was murdered, that he died trying to expose corruption." Rhea looked at the young man, saw Jackson in his face. The same eyes, the same jawline. "I remember your uncle," she said quietly. "He was brave. He was a good Marine. And you're right. He died a hero trying to do the right thing. I'm sorry he's gone. I'm sorry it took so long to get justice for him." The young Marine's eyes were wet. "Thank you, ma'am, for saving him in Fallujah, for giving my family 20 more years with him, for making sure the truth came out." He opened the box. Inside was a purple heart medal. "Uncle Jackson wanted you to have this. He earned it in Fallujah for the wounds you saved him from. He always said you deserved it more than he did, because you kept working even when you were wounded too. Thank you for everything." Rhea took the medal with shaking hands, looked at it, then at the young Marine, then at Kane, then at all the faces watching her. And for the first time in 5 years, for the first time since David's death, for the first time since she'd become invisible, Rhea Callahan allowed herself to believe that maybe she'd done enough. She'd fought hard enough. She'd sacrificed enough. She'd earned her peace. Kane stepped forward one more time. "Doc, one more thing. The Marine Corps has approved a new training initiative, Combat Medicine Excellence Program, based on the work you're doing here. They want you to help design the curriculum, train the trainers, make sure the next generation of corpsmen learns from the best." Rhea looked at him. "I'm not military anymore, Kane." "No, but you're still Doc. You'll always be Doc. And the Corps takes care of its own." That night, Rhea drove home through the quiet streets of Denver. She parked in her driveway, walked to her front door. Inside, she hung the Navy Cross and the Purple Heart next to the photos of her wedding her daughter and her Marines from Fallujah. She made coffee, sat at her kitchen table, and for the first time in 20 years, when she looked at those photos, she didn't feel the weight of guilt and loss. She felt pride and peace and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the war had finally ended. Not with a bang, not with revenge, but with recognition, with justice. With the simple acknowledgement that she'd done her job, done it well, and earned her place among the warriors who'd come before her and the ones who would come after. The Marines she'd saved would be okay. The truth had come out. The corrupt had been punished. The innocent had been vindicated. And Rhea Callahan's supply clerk, invisible woman, silent guardian, had finally found her way home from the war. The quiet warrior could rest. Her watch was over. But her legacy had just begun.